You're listening to the Bear in Mind podcast, episode number 58.
A podcast uncovering identity, color, and love, where driving yourself crazy is totally sane and curable. Now your host, T. Vias.
I'm a recovering people pleaser, and recently I had an urge to people please. It came up for me that I really wanted to lie, and I wanted to say something that wasn't true to me to somebody else. And I mean, the urge was so overwhelming that I didn't even respond to one of my friends for a couple days. That's how bad it was. With people pleasing, there are some harsh truths. And since I consider myself a recovering people pleaser, I know that in the beginning I didn't want to hear this. But I promise you that it's worth hearing. And there's two kind of big harsh truths. One is that people pleasers are liars. And whenever I would people please, I was saying something that was untruthful and not true to me. And you end up really, even though you're lying to the other person, what ends up being the worst thing about it is you end up lying to yourself, which is kind of, I think, harder to sit with in yourself than it is for that other person to be lied to. And the other harsh truth is that people pleasing is manipulative. And it sounds like, it's the guise of when you people please, you're trying to be kind and not hurt someone's feelings. And in the end, it doesn't genuinely work. And there's only really one reason why you're going to people please someone. It's so somebody else thinks something, so you want them to think something about you, like think that you're kind, that you're helpful, or you want them to do something. So if they think favorable of you, that they will do something, or if you do something for them, if you help them out, they'll help you out later. So the kind of that quid pro quo kind of relationship. And that's really the biggest lie that you tell yourself, is that you're being kind to somebody and you disguise it so that, you're protecting somebody or for whatever reason. And then underneath it, when you really crack away at the surface, it's really lying and manipulation. And so I want to talk about things that came up recently. So it was me kind of itching to people please somebody, but I also noticed that somebody was trying to people please me, not even kind of maybe in the traditional way. And so I'm going to talk about some of those signs that you can see in yourself and maybe even in somebody else. And one of the things that, and this is quite a common one, is we apologize a lot. And it's not to say that there isn't ever a moment that you can't apologize to somebody. And I think there's always room to apologize to somebody. And it's when we are a lot of times apologizing for being human, or we over apologize. So, for example, you forget a meeting, and this happens all the time. You're human. You are late because you overslept your alarm or traffic was bad, and things like this happen. And you go into this sorry, and then you explain yourself. So there's kind of this, okay, yeah, you're sorry, and you over-explain what happened in traffic, or you over-explain about or you're almost like, well, how did I oversleep? Or you're almost like questioning this revelation that, oh my God, you're human. And there's kind of this big story over-explanation with the apology. Instead of just, I'm sorry and thanks for waiting, and that's it. That's the end of the story. And I noticed this because this actually happened to me. I received an apology from somebody else a couple times, and I was like, it's no big deal. You're human. Life happens. And it really wasn't in the context of the whole big world. It wasn't that big of a deal. The other one kind of related to apologizing is kind of this over-explaining, but you kind of take it a step further. And it's whenever you share something with somebody, or you're trying to tell your story, you tell a lot of the backstory. Now, I think this is one of the more subtle ones. And sometimes backstory doesn't mean that if you're always telling a backstory that you're a people pleaser, because sometimes the backstory is necessary. for information or whatever. But if you ever notice that you always come with this, oh, but this is actually what happened, and you go back like a couple weeks. Well, first I sent this text, that person sent the text or this email or whatever, and you have to kind of get all of those things in order so that the other person can understand what happened and your position and your intention in it. And the way that this also comes up, because this came up for me when I wanted to people please, an invitation I'd received from a friend, and I didn't want to go. But I created a whole bunch of drama because I thought, oh my God, I'm going to hurt so many people's feelings and everything like that, when my answer was really no. And I thought of all these different ways to explain in the back, all of these reasons why it's not working. I had a whole backstory because I didn't want to give away my weekends because I was working on this and my weekends were dedicated to this and things like that. So already I have this backstory, I have this over explanation, I have everything ready in just to say a simple no. And a lot of times our no, it doesn't have to be just no or no thank you, but it can be a simple explanation. It can be, no, I prefer not to because I don't like large gatherings, or I prefer not to because I'm not really very extroverted when it comes to parties. And that's it. That's the end of the story. There's no big elaboration. It's just you prefer not to in a short, maybe explanation if it's a good friend. And this third one I also found was really subtle, and it was one of the more recent ones I discovered in myself, is that whenever I am getting ready to make a decision or do something like say no to an invitation or something like that, where I feel like I won't be seen as a kind person, I guess is basically what I think what will happen, what will be the consequence, the fear of some consequence of that happening is that somebody will have an unfavorable opinion of me, is we tend to check in with other people. So here's the situation happening over here, and you kind of ask people what they think about it. Like, oh, well, how do I do this? Or how do I let somebody down? Or how do I break up with somebody? And things like that. You check in because you're kind of trying to gauge for yourself what is the best way to handle it so that it comes across as nice. I mean, you're only checking in with other people to get their opinion so that you can gauge exactly how what the other person's reaction is going to be. Like, oh, if I do this, and that person's going to be like, oh no, that's a little bit too harsh. Don't say it that way. And you kind of find yourself checking in with people. And you can do this in other ways. You're kind of also checking in on your projects. Like sometime with my work projects, I sometimes check in a lot with people that I know, like, oh, what do you think about this? Should I do this? Should I write this? And I find that kind of checking in with people was one of my subtle ways of people pleasing. And I also realized that I think it was from the podcast from Gary Vee or something like that, where he said that he has a quote about people pleasing or something, or where you check in with people and it actually, you gain speed when you're no longer a people pleaser. And I thought that was kind of fascinating because I did spend a lot of time trying to accumulate everyone, like get a consensus so that I would know what would be like the best way to approach something so that I would be doing the right thing, and then I would be seen as doing the right thing instead of just going out there and failing and making a mistake and maybe even saying something rude and making that mistake. Because sometimes that's actually how you learn how to be tactful and how to have some social intelligence when it comes to communicating maybe not great news to somebody. You actually have to first go make the mistake. And so, yeah, I still catch myself doing all of these things. Apologizing way too much, having a backstory, and checking in with other people. And it may be quite harsh, all of the things that I said about people pleasing, but I think one of the things is that most of us have a tendency to people please. And we've kind of been socialized to do it. And I think I think it almost has to be like you rip the Band-Aid off. And once you kind of realize like, oh, this is what I'm doing, I'm actually lying to myself, you'll actually want to stop doing that because it can get quite exhausting to keep people pleasing. And so I'm going to wrap it up here, and I'm going to check back with you next week.
Thanks for listening. Listen for a new episode next Tuesday by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Bye for now.